In this lesson, I'm going to talk about special right triangles. There's actually two of them, and I'm only going to talk about the 45, 45, 90. Another lesson, I'll talk about the other one. What I want you to think about first is where this 45, 45, 90 triangle actually comes from. And it comes from this figure that I'm hoping when you look at it, it looks like a square. So what happens is, to come up with the 45, 45, 90 right triangle, we take that square and we cut it in half diagonally. So if we look at just the blue part, there's my 45, 45, 90 triangle. And the reason I tell you to think about a square is because most people know that in a square, all four sides are congruent. So that's going to tell me that in my 45, 45, 90 triangle, two of the sides are going to be congruent. And that's going to be very beneficial. If you can remember that, you really don't need to know the properties that I'm going to show you next, but the properties are going to help you out, but the properties will make it faster. That's it. So when you come here and I look at this, normally what I do is I go through and I fill all this in, but what we just said is in a 45, 45, 90 triangle, the two legs are congruent. Well, that's right. Let me see. Let me come up with a different color. Let's go with orange. That means that these two sides are congruent, which means when you go to fill out this table here, I know that if one of my legs is 3, my other leg is going to be 3. If one of my legs is 4, then my other leg is 4. If one of the legs is 20, the other one's 20. And I can continue on, so on and so forth. Now what I really want to look at, though, is how we find C. And I'm not going to go through the process of getting there. I'm just going to give it to you. And here's what happens. If you know a leg and you want to go, I think of it this way, to figure out the hypotenuse, all you have to do is multiply by root 2. Which then leads, if you know the hypotenuse and you want to get back to one of the legs, now you're going to need to divide by root 2. Just like that. Now another way to think about this is to say, well, if one of our legs is, call it x, or any variable you want, well then the other leg also has to be the same thing. It's going to be equal in length because they're congruent. And then your hypotenuse is going to be x, and then remember we said we had to multiply by root 2? Root 2. Which means when you come back to this chart here, if I know it's C, or if I know that A and B are 3, then C is going to have to be 3 root 2. That's the hypotenuse. If the legs are 4, well, take 4 and multiply it by root 2, and you get 4 root 2. If it's 20, well, then multiply by root 2, and you get 20 root 2, and you see the pattern. Now, the one here, though, is this last one. If I tell you that the hypotenuse is 10, well, then what's one of the legs? And that's where we come here, and I'm going to do a little work. Well, that comes here. I know what C is. Remember, I said I need to divide by root 2 if I'm going to go back. This one tells me that hypotenuse is 10. Well, then I'm going to divide by root 2. And if I want the exact answer, really my answer is right there. However, we don't want to leave our answer looking like that, so I'm going to simplify it. I'm going to multiply by a form of 1. My form of 1 is going to be root 2 over root 2. Notice everything that's in orange there is equal to 1. So what I have here is my answer. It's going to keep that value because I'm multiplying by 1. I'm just going to figure out what it actually equals. Well, 10 times root 2 is 10 root 2. Root 2 times root 2 is 2. And then if I simplify that, I end up with 5 root 2. Which tells me if the hypotenuse is 10, one leg is going to be 5 root 2, and so is the other. So that's a real quick lesson on the 45, 45, 90 triangle.